And we're live
And we're
again.
alive.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I think that we already have some people live and connected. So thanks for joining. If this is the first time that you're joining, I'll explain the format. My name is Ignacio. I'll be the host. I'm part of the Kiflo team. I have my colleague Tom. He will be also moderating all your questions. So the format today is a Q&A live session. So basically, we have an amazing guest. You'll have the chance to actually ask questions. We'll get those answers during the topic, not at the end. This is not a traditional webinar that it's boring. This is a conversation, okay? So before we actually jump into the introductions and the topics and everything, we really want to know what's your current role, what's your position, so that we get things going. So if you see there's a chat, you can just click there and put there in the chat what's your current role, what's your position, where you work, and then we'll get things started. We'll give a couple of minutes to people to actually join. So I'm seeing that they're joining now. So again, if you're just joining, put there in the chat what's your current role, what's your position, and then we'll kick things off in a few minutes, and I'll introduce you to our guest today. Okay, so again, this is a live Q&A session, so your questions are super important, and also we'll make sure that we get those answers during the session, not until the end. Okay, so we'll give a couple of minutes. Maybe Tom will wait for 1 or 2 minutes, and then
Yeah,
we'll introduce the topic.
exactly.
So we're almost at 7, and keep joining.
Yeah, don't be
One more
shy.
minute.
Just feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, as Ignacio said. We want to know more
Yes,
about you.
yes. So maybe 1 more minute, and then we'll kick things off. Again, this is being recorded, and if you sign up, you'll get the recording. And if you're watching the recording, you, we are glad that you're watching it. But of course, if you join live the next one, you can have the chance to actually ask your questions and get those answered during the session. Okay, so I think that we already have almost 10 people live, so let's kick things off. So today we have an amazing guest. The topic is also great. So I'll introduce the topic first, which is cracking the C-suite. So how to secure executive buying for your partner program, or basically how you actually, because a lot of partnership programs struggle to get like buying, headcount, budget, because they are seen as kind of like nice to have. This is going to change radically. I mean, like, our guest today is going to explain everything that he has done. And again, he has an amazing story as well. Our guest today is Gautham Pandiyan. He is the global head of cloud and SI and affiliate partnerships at Pendo. And we're going to go back to this, but he's a scientist that turned to software strategies. And in his career, he has driven over 500 million partner revenue impact, and also he now specializes in architecting win-win ecosystems so that the company scales with growth exponentially. Okay, so before joining Pendo, he worked for giants like Qualtrics, which is a SAP company, and I think that this is great. He enjoys mentoring the next generation of partnership pros. So Gotham, it's a pleasure having you, and welcome.
Thank you, Ignacio. Tom, it's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is ours. And I think that the first thing that I wanted to know before we jump into everything that we got ready for the audience today is, this is super kind of like, how did you end up being in partnerships starting from like being a scientist? That was amazing for me.
Well, so first, thanks for having me here. Welcome to all the attendees and folks listening in to recording. I stumbled into partnerships. I stumbled into software and tech, actually, because I was getting a PhD in molecular cancer biology, and then did an internship at a software company and found that it was much more my speed, and it worked well. And so I went at the time and asked my boss that, like, hey, I like working here. You like working with me? Hire me, right? And so we
Yeah.
made the job happen, and we marched on and didn't look back since. And so I started out basically at a small startup, owning the sales and marketing function for that company.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I realized as I started to acquire revenue targets, the best way to hit them was through partners. And so early on, like I got the religion around the fact that the way you can scale exponentially beyond your reach on your
Mhm.
resources is through partners. And so at that company, it started with a partnership I invested in with Microsoft, and then with the VAR channel and a few other things. But that resulted in us becoming a Microsoft Partner of the Year. I had a chance to
Mhm.
meet the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. We went on this epic growth journey afterwards, and so that definitely catapulted like what would have been much longer duration of growth
Mhm.
rather
Yeah.
quickly. So that's when. So I started out as a sales rep, sales leader. Carry the bag, had a quota, right? Trying to grow the company revenue as part of the management team, and realized like partnerships was the way to do it. So
Yeah.
that was my early introduction, and then I went on to other companies following that passion in my career.
That's an amazing story. And that's why we love to do this, because there's always a great story behind kind of like the people doing partnerships. And it's always different. Like you have a different, completely different vision from other people. And it's great that, of course, you've landed what you've done. I think that you're going to share a lot of things during the session that are related to this. And but first, before we dive into the first subtopic, and again, if you're just joining, please put your questions for Gotham in the chat so that we can get those answers during the session. But we got a few, just to break the ice. We got a few polls because we want to assess like what are the things that you're struggling with today. So maybe Tom, we can bring up the first one. So, what is the biggest hurdle when trying to get executive buying? So, this is classic, but they don't understand the partnership value. They lack or you lack the data attribution to prove ROI, unrealistic or uncalibrated expectations, and then competing priorities from other departments. So, please put here in the just click the one that you feel like is the most kind of like relative to what your current situation. And again, this is of course just for assessing
Yeah, it's
for the
anonymous.
sake of
So
the session. It's anonymous, it's a safe space, we won't share it with anyone. It's just to have an idea of what are you currently struggling today. So it seems like, of course, the lack of data and attribution to prove ROI seems to be the case. They don't understand the value of partnerships. And the other one, well, competing with priorities with other departments. So let's give it one more minute to see if there's any other. Seems like lacking the data and attribution to prove ROI 60%. So I think that that's critical. And I'm glad that this is the case, because Gotham will actually talk about this and how you can actually change this. So this is great. And maybe we have a second poll for before we jump into the other subtopic. So Tom, let's bring it. So how does your organization currently view the partnership function? Okay, so it could be either strategic. You have full buy-in from them. This could be also like, okay, some budget but need to prove value. It's probably most of the cases, if not all. Then it's siloed, so you operate independently with some oversight, and then ad hoc, you basically do partnerships on the side on deck, like you're doing it things on your own. But it seems like the second one probably will be the most one, which is like you've got some budget, but you still need to prove value. And I'm glad that you're here, because this is basically what Gotham will tell us from his experience, and will teach us how to actually get it. So maybe one more minute so that everyone can vote, but it seems like we've got a clear winner here as well. Gotham, what do you
again, it's
think? What are your
anonymous.
thoughts?
Just click on whatever you're struggling with so Gotham basically knows what he should focus on during the session.
Yeah, it seems like siloed and some budget, but needs still to prove that those are the ones that are currently the current situations.
Yeah, it's very interesting and not a surprise, but good
Not a
to
surprise at all, right? Like we we had a yeah. It seems like now siloed seem to be kind of like winning. So you operate independently, and then the rest is more related to, well, it's good that we're seeing at least some that have like full buying, which is great. But yeah, typically that's not the case.
Well, that's great.
Okay.
Maybe that person can be, or persons can be speakers on your future sessions.
That would be amazing. Just put it in the chat. Like, by the way, if you're just joining, please put in the chat all the questions that you have for Gautam. And now we'll deep dive into the first subtopic. So maybe we can bring it up to Tom, which is speaking the language of the C-suite. Like, this is how you actually translate that kind of like partnership jargon into real kind of like financial things that they actually understand. So all yours, Gautam. Take it.
Well, thank you, Ignacio, and thank you for everybody that took the poll. So speaking the language of the C-suite, right? So let's actually, before we jump into that, let's kind of rewind for a second. One of the things I've noticed, growing my career from sales into partnerships, right, is oftentimes there's this distinction that happens that, oh, I'm in partnerships, I'm not in sales, or those kinds of things. First, like word of advice I would say is like, we're all in sales, right? We're all in sales of some kind or the other. Like, and because we're all selling something to other people, right? Whether that's our ideas, our projects, or our campaigns, or whatever it is, right? Your code. And so there's some books I've read that are really refreshing about just embracing that mindset. So that's important because at the end of the day, this speaks a little bit to like language of the C-suite. What does a CEO care about more than anything? Growth, right? In most environments, most CEOs are charged and boards are charged with driving growth. Right? Growth directly ties to revenue, which is most easily affected by sales. Right? And of course, there's other elements in the picture. Obviously, there's elements of product engineering, cost efficiencies. There's all kinds of other things that matter, right? The metrics that matter. When you think about your company, whether you're working at a big public company or a small startup, at the end of the day, there's some sort of governance structure. The executive team is responsible for a set of KPIs. Do you know what those are? Right? That is important to know because at the end of the day, what you want to do is to be a force multiplier for your company, with your partner program, with your partners, with the motions that you're trying to build. And if you do, and when you do, and then you succeed in showing the data around it, I know a lot of you had some challenge with showing data. We'll talk about that separately. Then you will get budget, right? Because why wouldn't you? Because you're showing trajectory to being a force multiplier for the business. So the important thing there is to just elevate for a moment out of things like that. As partner pros, we tend to fall into the weeds on, say like partner source revenue, partner influence revenue, number of partners, partner tiers, these kind of things, right? But how does that correlate to the top KPIs of a company? Be that NRR, be that overall revenue growth percentages, because percentages matter too, by the way. So if you have a new partner category or partner program or partnership, like the quarter-over-quarter or year-over-year growth trajectory does matter. Why? Because it tells a story, right? Momentum matters, right? Especially at a time like this where so much is changing in the market. So keep that in mind because at the end of the day, your executive team is typically meeting quite often. They're doing board meetings every quarter and they're looking at growth velocity, right, for the company as a whole. Some of that is like top line, some of that is bottom line metrics that have to do with things like profitability and EBITDA. And so when you start to correlate things you're doing with the partner program to like not just top line revenue, but even things like cost avoidance, right, or CAC, how do partners help you lower CAC? CAC stands for customer acquisition cost, right, or cost of sale. Both of those are good levers too. At the end of the day, like as partner pros, you probably know there's lots of levers you can pull to impact a business across all kinds of departments and functions. And so I saw some of you responded with like competing priorities with other departments. So if you're facing that, then I would challenge you to flip that and figure out how you can get those departments to take on parts of the partner business, right, to help them meet their KPIs. Because if you're a customer success department, right, and you care about retention, guess what? Partners can really help you with retention. The technology partners typically help with that, the layering on integrations, right? Service partners can help that with value delivery. There's a lot of hyperscalers could help with, budget access to their marketplaces. There's a lot of ways partners can help with that metric, for example, retention rate, which is on the minds of most of your executive team. So short answer is like, make sure like what you're building around your program, what data you are able to gather and report has some correlation to the things that matter. And they may not always be the very traditional metrics that are partner associated. So that's part of your job is to translate that up. And then make sure those example, the data is clear, but then the stories also matter. So I think we have a topic about that. So we'll come back to that later. But I'll pause there and see, Ignacio,
Yeah.
Tom, something you want to add to that?
I think it's amazing and well, funny. Like Sammy's like full buying wasn't the case a year ago. So Sammy, I mean, if you can share your story or where you're at today, that would be amazing. But I completely agree with you, Gotham, and thanks for sharing that because I think that it's critical. And what you just said about like aligning with other teams and their goals and making those kind of like partner driven, that's gold. That's pure gold. So probably we'll hear more about that. But I don't know if you have any final thoughts before. Again, if you have questions about this topic, please put it in the chat, or any question, just put it in the chat, and Gotham will get those answered. But I think that we can move on to kind of like because yeah, Trevor has one. I think before we move
Yep.
on.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. So Trevor is asking, when looking to invest in partnerships, what return of investment or growth velocity percentage are benchmarks you look for to know where to focus your time and effort?
Yeah, great question, Trevor. So that's one of the biggest challenges partner pros have is prioritization, right? And so there tends to be a like infinite world of possibilities and things keep mushrooming. So that is like a important skill to develop. Now, in terms of like how do you know what to invest? My advice is like follow the money, right? Follow the metrics that matter. Follow the things that are important from a company priority perspective. Your company might be focused in a certain industry or geo or segment, be that enterprise or small business or commercial or whatever it is, right? So follow that prioritization matrix for where your partners layer in, because the same partners don't necessarily play in the same places, right? You might have a set of GSIs that are really important in the enterprise, but they're not at all like as important of a route to market in small businesses, right? So that's where like you'll want to prioritize like the partner types and categories. And in terms of like thinking about the outcome, obviously there's a set of inputs in terms of like activities, enablement, number of partners, all those kind of things, right? Then that produces pipeline that turns into revenue, right, at a certain win rate. So if you're able to track that entire funnel progression, that's great. If you can't, then I would do a lot of work to try to gather that kind of data. That data is really important to the point that was made earlier about the difficulty of gathering data. I'll say like that's just a shout out to like all the folks who are helping partner pros with operations. Operations is one of the like unsung heroes that is so important. Either your RevOps team is helping you, or you have a dedicated partner ops function. Just buy those people coffee or lunch, or like say thank you to them. That is so important. Or if you're struggling to get support, work to build that relationship really strong, because that's where the key lies in getting the data that you need to prove impact, right? And once you've done that, scaling becomes easier. And so as you do that, you will then be able to track things like what is the win rates where partners are attached to deals, right? How does that change for partner sourced versus partner influenced deals? For example, are deals bigger when partners are involved versus not, right? So those kind of data points are really important. And that will tell you, you can slice and dice that by partner category, by partner, specific partner. And then eventually when that data starts to build, you'll be able to like automatically index and prioritize, right? In a data-driven way. Obviously, like there's always some anecdotes that matter. The anecdotes and things like cultural fit matter too, right? Because it's hard, as much as the data will tell you one thing. If two companies' cultures don't mesh well together, it's hard to make that work well, right? So there are certain other intangibles like that matter. So you use that in your prioritization filter. But certainly, once you have the right data flowing, that it becomes a little bit easier to make data-driven prioritization decisions about which partners are driving the highest win rates, which ones are driving the most pipeline, which ones are driving the largest deal sizes, who's driving services scale for your services team, so you don't have to go hire as many people in-house, perhaps, right? There's a CAC or cost of sale benefit there, and so that should help you prioritize your time and effort. And generally speaking, I'm a fan of the mantra quality over quantity. There's a lot of vanity metrics in partnerships. One of those could be the number of partners in your ecosystem, right? Certainly, like there's large ecosystems that have thousands and thousands of partners. There's a big overhead that comes with that, right? An operational burden that comes with that. And so certainly you could achieve a lot with a little. So I think so keep that in mind, and then use data and some of your judgment and anecdotes to prioritize.
That That was great, and shout out to partner ops and rev ops. And yeah, I think that the last thing that you said is spot on. Like, do not accumulate logos. I mean, it's just like a graveyard. So just like focus on the ones that will drive revenue for sure. And Trevor, thanks for the question. It seems like it was super helpful. Thanks. So yeah, it seems like you nailed it, Gautam. So let's move on. If you have questions, please again put it in the chat as Trevor did, and Gautam will get those answered. So how are kind of like the initial or the small wins important here? I mean, because again, this is kind of like the make it or break it, right? If you get it right, probably you can get to the next level.
Yeah, wins are really, really important, right? Wins are like the gold currency in partnerships. And depending on the nature of partnerships you're working with, sometimes you're working with partners that are basically like an overlay to a direct sales team, right? There's a certain way that works. In other cases, you're working with partners who are resellers for driving that entire sales machine for you. You might have OEM partnerships or other kinds of partners, right? So just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, depending on the partner type that you're working with. But in general, no matter which kind of partner you're working with, wins are super important. And more important, the win stories, right? So, how did the win actually happen? I like to call that the anatomy of a win, because it's great when you land a win with a partner. Right? If you're working with a partner that's collaborating with your direct sales team, great. You want to call that out, right? You want to call out, here's an example of this like 7-figure deal at this enterprise logo. The partner and the sales rep here, they did these things together. Here's like how they worked on the process, how it started, moved through the process and landed. And then, of course, the other side of the coin is win stories matter for your internal audience within your company and your partner. The other thing that matters is a customer story, right? So when you've delivered customer impact afterwards, then publish that publicly too, right? Kind of a no-brainer. I think a lot of companies do this, but if you can involve the partner in that too, even better. That's a good partner-forward culture and partner-centric culture. Because at the end of the day, like your company and your partners exist to serve your mutual customers, right? And so the win stories for the customer are customer impact. The win stories for your company tend to be those key metrics, right? Sales metrics or retention metrics or cost metrics that you're looking to optimize. And so all that is say, when you land those wins, right? Typically, like what ends up happening in a lot of programs is most programs are started with a charter and mandate of like drive partner source revenue, incremental to the business. And obviously, that's what everybody should be building towards, right? That is like the contribution value for that is high. However, when you recruit a new partner out the gate, that's pretty hard to do, right? Because essentially you're putting your hand out and you're saying, bring me leads or opportunities or revenue. And so obviously you have to believe in certain principles like give to get, for example. And how do you get partners involved with you in winning attached to your opportunities, right? So if you have a set of opportunities, can you get a partner involved that either has some incumbent relationship in the account, has some expertise that could be helpful for you, or that could influence your win? And when they do that, it builds this culture of winning with your team that then helps them know what to spot when they're looking at other opportunities, right? So naturally, the partner influenced wins lead to then partner sourced pipeline eventually, right? That you still need the right enablement, you still need to capture mind share, win the battle of what's in it for me. All of those things are still true, but just winning together makes a difference, right? And there's no better feeling. And when you do, celebrate that wildly and loudly. Publish the win stories, evangelize it internally. And the other thing I'll just quickly add on that note is a partner leader's job should be, frankly, spending half your time internally evangelizing, right? Because if you spend all your time externally, but you don't have support internally in the business, like you're going to run into obstacles, right? And so that's the other bit of like the important thing to keep in mind is like, make sure you've got a right balance of like internal support, depending on the size of your business and who you need to
Yeah.
marshal along with external, again, partner stakeholders.
I love the last part that you said. You got it super right, Gotham, and thanks for sharing this because it's critical. But the last piece that you just shared, like you need to get like the external part probably like spot on, but the internal it's extremely important. If you're not aligned and you don't get like the buying from your sales team right away and make them also part of the win. And also, for instance, partner marketing. And we've got a great example like Tom here. He works in marketing, but he also helps with the partner marketing, and we shout out all the wins. And I think that it's critical. I mean, you just need to make those team part of the how they are actually making that happen with a partner. So sales plus partner, and then marketing spreading out the word. So I think that what you just said is critical, and it's super appreciated as well. Probably a lot of people need to hear this. So again, if you have questions for Gotham, please put it in the chat as Trevor did, and we'll get those answered. But we are also aware of the time, so we need to move on to the next subtopic. And I think that this is also kind of like part of where you actually bringing that kind of like scientist profile and the data and all that being like from scientist to sales and then bringing to partnerships. I think it makes a lot of sense. But probably the main kind of like thing here is that having the storytelling plus the data, that's where things happen, right?
100%, right? And first of all, go Tom. Well, congrats on your partner marketing hat. And I'll just kind of quickly add back on our previous comment
Thank
that
you.
they say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a partner ecosystem,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
partners, and so you need that support from across the business, right? So lavish
I
that
love that.
praise everywhere, right? That's like
Yeah,
the secret
Exactly.
weapon in your arsenal. So going back to your point about data driven and emotional levers to get buy-in, both are super important, right? Because you think about it, the world is yet not yet been taken over fully by AI agents, right? In the matrix, and so we are still ultimately humans that are making decisions, and humans are driven largely by emotion and perception a lot, as much as they are by data and logic. Both are true. You're not going to get a lot of budget and support without the appropriate data to back it up. However, you're also not going to get that if there's perception challenges or there's emotional distance, right? So you have to do both. So the storytelling and wins help you with like, the emotional element of it, right? And then the data you're collecting through ops and attribution and measurement is going to collect the data side of it. And at the end of the day, it's your job to put those things together in a narrative. What does a narrative say? Because data can be interpreted a lot of ways. I know this well from my days as a scientist. There's the data can be basically interpreted to come to lots of conclusions, right? So what's the conclusion from the data? And then how does that backed up by an example? Humans are really good at learning by examples, right? Most of them. So I find it helpful to like ask the question. So what's an example of a customer you work with? What's an example of a partner you work with? An example of a win, right? So think of the storytelling as like example storytelling. And so oftentimes just pick one of your best examples, right? That exemplifies what you could do more of. And that's a really good thing to anchor on, because if you create this like narrative that's like, here's what the data is showing you, here's an example of a strong partner win, there's 100 more like this if we had X to support it, right? It's hard to turn down that kind of argument. So, but the key there is picking the right example that's replicable, because there is a challenge in partnerships about replicability and scalability. There tend to be a lot of like one-offs that happen, right? One-off partnerships, one-off partner wins that don't tend to be very repeatable or scalable. And so part of your job is also to identify what is a repeatable, scalable motion. What can you do more than once, more than twice, right? And you could do it 10 times or 20 times if you had certain ingredients to support you in that, right? And then articulate what those things are, and then look for garnering that support, right? Internally and externally. And so that's the important bit. You need both those levers to be effective. So don't forget that. And then make sure you are collecting those, celebrating those, amplifying those, and then success will follow.
well said. And I think that everyone in partnerships go through this. And please, if you have any examples, or it doesn't need to be questions, if you have any examples
Yeah.
or things that you want to share, just put them there in the chat. We appreciate that. So I think that now if there are any other questions, we're probably getting to the most important topic that today you're going to share with us, Gotham, which is basically aligning to the company's north star. Like this is kind of like critical. If you don't get this right, probably there's something that won't work or you won't exist in the future. But it's not about, I mean, this is related to the poll. Like if you're operating like a silo, probably you're doing this wrong. So I'm keen to understand from your experience how you achieve this and how what you can actually tell the audience that it's critical to do.
Yeah, so this goes back, I think, to our original section of discussion, which is understanding your executive teams, KPIs and goals, and the company priorities, right? So first of all, like you're all employees of some companies when you're in these functions, right? How well do you understand and can you articulate the company strategy and priorities? So I'll pause for a second there, let that sink in. That is like the starting point, right? If you struggle to articulate your company's strategy and key priorities, then you need to work on that first, right? Then once you do, you feel comfortable with that and you're confident about it, use that as a filter, right? And that filter should filter which partners you're recruiting, which partners you're maybe sunsetting or offboarding, which partners you're investing in, like what programmatic elements you need to invest in, all of those things, right? At the end of the day, like your company North Stars will dictate like which industry segments or geos or a segment of size of customer that you're after, what's your ICP, and then is there overlap between your ideal partner profile and your ideal customer profile? And so those are some like all levers you can use to map that. But at the end of the day, like things change a lot, right? And especially now in tech. If you're in tech, things are changing constantly, right? And your partner programs are probably going to change too. Your company priorities could change too. But typically, if you've got some good grounding, and here's your plan for the fiscal year, like as much of all that change happens, sort of like just think back to what that overall strategy is. And unless that's changed dramatically, just peg yourself to it, right? Like that's a good way to like work through any turbulence or chaos is like just remind yourself like what it is that the company's trying to accomplish and is what you're doing going to help that, right? And if it's not, then that's something that's worth deprioritizing, right? In favor of something else that could actually help. And so that's a good lens to use. Now, again, what is an example? We got to talk about examples before, right? A company priority for you might be like deepening your focus in the SMB market in a certain geography, like, or you might be like a multi-product expansion, right? So then ask yourself, like, which partners are equipped to do that? And sometimes, like, we can fall into traps as partner pros based on the relationships that we have, where like we're not using the filter as effectively or as as well as we should. And so like relationships sometimes will trump like the right cause, the right moves to make, based on your company priorities. So that's worth like just acknowledging, like we're all humans. Speaking of emotions, that they were affected by it. So just, remind yourself of that and then kind of revisit every quarter. If you have OKRs or other methods of prioritizing, revisit more frequently if you have to on a monthly or weekly basis. Like, is what you're doing still tied to company priorities? If it's not, what can you prune? That's a healthy exercise. It is prioritization by subtraction, right? Like, what things can you take off the list and make room for that you can do more deeply and focused way? And that's where like sometimes like if there's company North Stars that don't line up well to key partners that you're working with or things have changed, like you got to make some hard calls, right? And as you can't inevitably please everybody in the business. That's the other thing. Like if you were trying to like rank order your limited resources, how would you do that, right? What's your like priority 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Like literally write it down as like a ranking system in your plans. Communicate that, get support on it, and actually get broad support on it, right? So when you've built your plan, make a list of all the stakeholders that are important to you, depending on like what you're focused on, whether that's tech partnerships, it's a product engineering team, or it's or customer success, perhaps. Maybe if it's another kind of partnership, it may be different functions in the business. And go socialize your plan with all these folks. Get them to share feedback. At the end of the day, like a plan that you co-create with other departments becomes one that is more bought in by those departments, right? Going back to that idea of like, how are you going to get support? Like articulate this as like our plan. It's not your plan. It's the collective company plan, right? it's and you happen to have a portion of it or whatever it is, right? And so those are important bits, because end of the day, like everyone, those all those departments should also be building things focused on the company North Star. When you piggyback onto their work and help them meet their goals, you're doing it too, right? And you're getting more support from them to do it. So I'll pause there. See Tom and Ignacio if you want to add anything.
Going back to what you said about like becoming an evangelist, right? Like if you want like the company to be partnerships first, you need to evangelize every part of every department or team in order to get the buying. So I completely agree with you. And also, again, if you have any questions for Gotham, that now's the
This is your
moment to
last
put them there
chance
in the
to
chat.
get them
I do,
answered. Don't be. I think
I
our
do
audience
have.
today was very shy, to be honest. Like, don't be
No, no,
shy,
we had
guys.
Trevor, Sammy. I'm sure that there are others that had questions.
Yeah,
So if
Trevor
you
was the
want to
hero
put
of the
them,
day, definitely. Thank you, Trevor, for asking the question.
Let's send
yeah, no, but
bonus points then.
yeah, for sure. But there you go, Trevor. Another one.
Oh,
Pendo sharing
nice.
North Star.
So Trevor has another question for you. Are you open to sharing Pendo's current North Star? Would be interesting to hear a specific way you're managing and evangelizing partners internally and externally.
Yeah, good
Ooh.
question, Trevor. So I can't get too detailed into Pendo's plans necessarily, but what I can tell you is, so Pendo is about a 13-year-old business, fairly public information. We've had, I joined Pendo about 10 months ago, right? And so a lot of what I'm telling you, I'm actually executing, to help drive a transformation at Pendo to be partner first, partner centric, partner forward, right? You can use whichever terms you like. And the progress is happening year over year. Like from what I've been told from this time last year, like we've seen significant growth in a variety of our partners. And the company has made partners a key way to diversify our priorities around AI, around our enterprise focus. Like there's a few key areas the company's focused on, and a large part of those things are all going to run through partners. And so big bets have been made on the back of that. Now, how did all that happen? And so, and what was the journey to setting that up? Well, one, like you had to kind of solve the chicken and egg problem, right? There is a chicken and egg problem when you get started, right? It's worth acknowledging because where can you have results to show when you don't when you need to go build some things first, right? And so that's where I call it like don't ignore the micro wins. Like every win is not necessarily like a macro win, seven-figure deal that a partner brought to the table and closed for you, right? There's a lot of things that happen along the way, right? Like, so when you think about the things that happen along the way, the milestones, like milestones are things like recruiting new partners, right? That's great, celebrate it. They could become vanity metrics, acknowledge that, but it's still worth celebrating. Like you are attracting more partners into your ecosystem, right? So we would do that, right? We would celebrate when we sign new partners. We'd announce it internally. We'd make sure there were more stakeholders involved in the recruitment of those partners, perhaps, right? That felt more ownership around it. Then, of course, you have to enable those partners. Then you've got to build pipeline with them, close revenue with them, right? And so all of those are like stages in the journey that you can celebrate milestones around. And so just evangelize those things internally and externally, where your partners are helping you grow the pie in the market, amplify that, right? Don't make them do that on their own. And so when they're doing the right things you want them to do, like celebrate that behavior and amplify it. And so then there's reinforcement of that, both internally and externally. And so those are all kind of examples of things we're doing in the last 10 months. Also built a long range vision, right? So part of it is like it's hard for people to do a lot of like frenetic activity when they don't know exactly what they're marching towards in the long range, right? And as partner pros, you probably know this. It takes a while to build a partner ecosystem, right? And programs and partnerships that produce the kinds of outcomes that you want. Well, folks typically don't have a lot of patience to wait for years for that to materialize. But if you can articulate, here's where we're going in the next 3 years, but here's where we want to go in the next year, the next quarter, as milestones to ladder up to that, there's a way to kind of tell are you on track or not, right? You're running the marathon, but what are the mile markers along the way? And so when you build a plan like that, socialize it like crazy. I did that. I met folks all over the business, in the executive team, but also like the front lines in nearly every department. I even defined like what does this partner program and plan mean for every department specifically? What were the benefits for each specific department? So going back to like here's how partners affect finance, right? Here's how partners impact marketing and
Yeah.
what they could get out of it. Like, so, one, you have to put that kind of plan together, right? After doing appropriate listening and researching and gathering information, learn from what's working for the company directly, because depending on the kinds of partners you're working with, your partner should either be an amplification layer for your company
Mhm.
or an extension layer, right?
Correct.
So those things are, if it's an amplification layer, you should learn from what's working in your direct approach, and then teach partners how to amplify that. If you
Mhm.
haven't figured it out directly, it's kind of hard for partners to take something and help you get lucky and striking product market fit, right? And so those are some things to know in terms of like the journey. So all that to say, we have a couple of key rocks that aren't probably secrets. It's Pendo is historically grown up from a lot of focus around a PLG motion into a sales-led enterprise motion.
Mhm.
And of course, like a lot of other companies in the market, we're heavily invested in what we're doing around AI. And so those are a couple of key North Stars for us. And,
Yeah.
we are thinking about which partners can help us achieve that. That also means like sometimes like there's space that opens up in our business. We have a very important commercial segment of business and companies in the mid-market and SMB space that have
Yeah.
with some fantastic customers and viral adopters of Pendo. We can't ignore those segments, right? We want those segments to feel well supported.
For sure.
As some internal resources are being pulled up, perhaps to focus on enterprise customers, that opens up space and dependencies for the company to create opportunity for partners with our SMB and mid-market customers, right? And so there's also lanes for us to drive partners into to do more work with us, and opportunity there. So those are all kind of things that we've gone on the journey around and just driven evangelism internally, externally, built some momentum, celebrated the micro wins, and then we're as a result of that we're making big bets on partners this year.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I hope, Trevor, you got the answer that you were expecting, because Gotham shared pretty much everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
So thanks for opening and sharing that. And I think that it's important what Sabrina said, like, great stuff, honestly. Thanks, Gotham. So again, thank you for sharing this, and thank you, the audience, for actually joining live and getting those questions there. It's super important, and we really appreciate those. So thanks again. And maybe yeah, Trevor says crushed it. Super grateful for the responses. So there you go, Gotham. Thank you both, Trevor and Gotham. Yeah, maybe I don't know. We are almost wrapping it up. I don't know if you have final thoughts. I had like one maybe short for you. Like, how do you envision everything that's happening with AI in, like, specifically in partnerships? Because partnerships is people, kind of like people, and how do you potentially see this for Pendo and the rest of the partnerships professionals?
Yeah, it's a great time to be in tech. It's a great time to be in partnerships because I'm seeing this happen in the market. Companies are increasingly realizing that that partner lever that helps you scale more efficiently, profitably, the time is here and now to invest in it, right? So more and more leadership teams and companies are realizing that. So you're in a good time period to take advantage of that. AI is opening up a lot of new opportunity. Yes, there's a lot of disruption, and you do need to master the tools and understand the mentality of all that. And then you also need to understand like what it means for how you can help drive those levers of growth for your companies. So I'll say like it's a good time to be in it. All the same basics we talked about apply from before, but some new things are opening up too, right? Like data is getting more democratized. So with MCP servers and like every data showing up in different places, like if you have data assets at your company, like think through what that means for like where your data shows up in like ChatGPT or Gemini, or where it shows up in Claude and whatnot, right? And so all of that is like getting to be interesting. Like the ground is shifting around all of us. So we all have crystal balls, certainly, right? We're looking at customer demand signals. Like
Yeah.
I see another good North Star, follow the customer demand signals. There are certainly a lot of confusing signals right now in the market because we've gone from like early days of like Gen AI POCs to like agentic AI production environments in across businesses. So, just think about the value chain. Like, where do you play? What levels of honesty? And based on that, like, how can you help drive your company objectives, right? As a
Correct.
leader for exponential growth. And it's a good time to be in that position. And I wish you the best as you follow that path and much success. And hopefully, you'll be on this session in the future telling your story, and I'll be there asking questions and telling you crushed the responses as well.
Yeah, that's great, and I love that. Maybe Trevor or Sabrina could
That would
be
be
in the
amazing.
show. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. So, again, Gotham, on behalf of the audience and the Kiflo team, thanks again for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. And for you that joined live, thank you. Thanks for doing this. If you're watching the recording, thank you, and please join. There's the link there for our next session. That's going to be super interesting. Is in March 19th. So that's with Hayrich. How did partnerships help
19th,
Hayrich get to 10 million ARR in 29 months? So
29,
please,
10 million.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Feel free to subscribe.
You can subscribe there. And again, Gotham, thank you so much for being part of the session. It was a real pleasure having you. And for the rest of the audience, thanks. And we really look forward
See
to
you
having
next
you
time.
on the next one.
My pleasure. All the
Awesome.
best. Take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Ciao, ciao.